Hi, everybody, wherever you're tuning in from. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good day. Welcome to this session titled Entrepreneurship and Startups, How Africans in the Diaspora Can Support African Innovation. Thank you so much for joining this discussion. My name is Modoni Waigwa, and I am a Baobab Platform Alumni in Residence Fellow. So continue saying hi to us in the chats and tell us where you're coming from. So as more people join in, you can tell us in the chats, what does African innovation mean to you? Let us know what it means. So once again, this Zoom event is titled Entrepreneurship and Startups, How Africans in the Diaspora Can Support African Innovation. I am an African woman living out her childhood dreams. From a young age, I knew I wanted to be in the media and entertainment space because each time I would watch films or TV shows, I just knew I wanted to be part of that world. And so I co-founded a company called Nifty Works Plus 10 years ago, and we create content through animations, documentaries, TV shows. But the seed of entrepreneurship was planted in me as a young girl because my mother truly inspired me because she was an entrepreneur and she was a pioneer in the microfinance space. And just looking at her being so committed to build her business, being committed to seeing lives transformed through her business, that seed was deeply rooted in me. And I told myself as I grew in my career that one day too, I will own a business. So we have convened this event to explore the incredible potential of Africans in the diaspora to ignite innovation in Africa. African hearts beat across the globe, and our unity has never been more essential. From opportunities to mentorship to knowledge sharing, we're building bridges that span continents. We are the change makers. We are the dreamers. We are the innovators that are uplifting this continent. So drop in the chat and say we are the change makers, we are the dreamers, and we are the innovators uplifting our continent. Our incredible panel of guests for this event will be sharing their innovation journeys and insights on the vital importance of African innovation. As always, we'll be taking your questions at the end of this session or towards the end of this session, so drop them into the chat. Our first speaker is Sydney Scott Sam, who is a celebrated leader in Africa's marketing and entrepreneurship space. For 10 years, he has led the mission to help over 500 African brands to build a strong brand with his tech platform, Workspace Global. The platform has dramatically transformed access to high-quality creative services and helped create remote work opportunities for hundreds of African freelancers in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, and South Africa. Workspace aims to create millions of remote work opportunities to curb Africa's growing unemployment gap. Sydney also leads a global mindset transformation nonprofit titled Open Space Global that helps thousands of Africans on the continent and in the diaspora to lead change and live a fulfilling life through open, honest group conversations. Spearheaded by hundreds of volunteers worldwide, Open Space Conversations have been held in Nigeria, Ghana, the UK, and is aiming to open in other countries shortly. Welcome, Sydney. Say a quick hello, and thank you once again for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the warm welcome. Muthoni, it's really nice to be here with you. I'm just very excited for the conversation.
Our second speaker, Dale Titus, is a Web3 entrepreneur with a background originally in real estate and fundraising for alternative early-stage UK-based tech startups. Now a founder of a decentralized community building platform called Web3 Accra, and also sits on the board of Arts Help, an NGO working with the United Nations to build the world's first digital climate library. As a proud father, he sees the importance of leaving a legacy and setting an example for generations to come. Currently, Del sits on the board of Amplify Africa, serves as a brand ambassador for sustainable fashion brand Allbirds, and sits on the board of the National Film Association created by the Office of the President in Ghana. Del's life work is now strictly focused on advancing causes that narrow in on decentralized technology that works towards creating community, connection, sustainability, and cultural impact. Welcome, Del, and say a quick hello, and thank you once again for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for hosting this. Nice to see you all, and I look forward to having this amazing conversation.
So we're here to get inspired by your work and just see how you have come on this journey of African entrepreneurship and innovation. So I'll start with you, Sydney. Can you share the story behind your decision to pursue entrepreneurship and the journey that you have taken to get to where you are today?
Awesome. So my perspective on that and answering that question, changes probably every couple of years. I got into entrepreneurship back in university. I went to the University of Ghana, Legon. So if you went to University of Ghana, Legon, please shout out to you. I started my first business then, which was a stand-up comedy, live music, and spoken word concert that I did across Ghana. It birthed some of the artists we know today, like Kiddy and Mr. Easy. Those were some of their very first platforms. I got into that because I actually didn't really fit in other places in terms of like going for parties, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought I'd create something that I could also enjoy myself. Now, in the spirit of creating that, I started to really understand what it took to run a business. And there were certain gaps that I was facing especially in relation to creative work. So I started to just delve into the world of creating websites, creating designs for that business. It wasn't really a business. It was just a platform and a community that I was creating at the time. But then that journey of trying to figure out and growth hack and, solve problems for that organization is really what spearheaded my entrepreneurship career, especially into workspace, which made me understand that a lot of businesses were struggling with creative support because they wouldn't be able to brand themselves properly. And if you don't brand yourself properly, you can't compete in certain markets, even the local market or abroad. But we also recognize that as much as I was helping businesses, or I started to understand the needs of businesses, I was the one creating the work at the time. And I also came to understand the struggle that African creatives also face in trying to find customers, trying to project manage, trying to create a good brand, trying to do quality control, issues of capacity. There's a lot of things that people just take for granted. So it's in my inquiry and quest to understand the client side of the creative process and the creative side of the business process that led me into launching Workspace and kind of really spearheaded my entrepreneurship journey. Ever since, I've just come to understand how crucial it is that entrepreneurs are celebrated and championed, because I believe as much as government and international institutions are trying to create change on the continent, I've never seen an army of people who are so well motivated to create change in a sustainable way, right? So it's not short-term, grants or short-term projects. It's innate that the entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship is birthing ideas that are literally changing livelihoods on a small scale and a large scale. And that's really what has, ignited my passion as an entrepreneur, but also to support entrepreneurship in Africa all around. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my story.
I'm hearing you say how creatives struggle to find work and freelancers as well, and how you understand the pipeline of how creative work is developed. And a memory just came to mind when I was in advertising, and I would go brief the creatives on, if be it a poster, be it whatever it was that the client wanted. And one of the things that I came to recognize was advertising has such a great pool of creatives. So how do you pick out the right talent to be part of your organization?
Right. So just to speak a little bit more about the model that Workspace currently operates, Workspace is the platform in between the customer, that's the business, and then the creative. However, contrary to what other platforms like Upwork or Fiverr are doing, where they make them meet independently, Workspace takes on the entire project management process, right? So that both the customer and the creative don't have to worry about managing the project, right? We will manage the project end to end using technology so that everybody is happy. We're trying to drive down costs to be one of the most affordable ways to get creative work across the world and the fastest way to get creative work across the world. So we're aiming towards 24-hour delivery for any project, which is a bit of an ambitious goal. Currently, we are about 3 days and 5 days, but we're trying to get there. So that's just to give you that context. So what we found interesting is that creatives for advertising actually, some of them are in there because it's only the advertising industry that would absorb them. There's a lot of people who just care about, for example, writing for handbooks for nonprofits, right? That's a copywriter, or designing for gender-based startups, right? And it's not necessarily in the advertising space, but some just in a creative space, supporting them with corporate profiles and other documents, right? So we're very particular about how we recruit. And in the recruitment process, we're educating the person applying about the mindset shift that they need to have, that working with Workspace doesn't necessarily require like pitches, et cetera, et cetera. You're really working with a creative director who really supports you with research and information, so that the language that a customer uses is different from the language you give to the creative. The client can say something, but a client can say, make my flyer pop, right? But that doesn't mean anything to a creative. You need to be able to tell a creative that, use contrasting colors with this, color palette, and use these fonts, so we are able to refine that language, to be able to get that feedback. And so we look for creatives that understand this, creatives that believe in fast work, creators who are also looking for a better way of living, in the sense of more flexibility, because Workspace gives you geographic flexibility. You can work anywhere, and also time flexibility, right? So whether you're in school, whether you're pregnant, whether you're disabled, whatever it is, it creates that inclusivity for access to work. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So I'll come to you, Del. What ignited your passion to venture into the world of entrepreneurship, and specifically Web3?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I think for me, both my parents are, my father, my late father, and mother, who's currently alive, were very active entrepreneurs. They worked side by side, businesses were next to each other. So I kind of grew up leaving school, going into their offices and watching them work. And then that kind of inspired me in my early years, whilst I was studying, always trying to find a way to create value, whether it was selling clothes, whether it was selling, gaming cards in school, wherever it was, I was trying to find a way to create a business out of something. And I think I had this moment where, it's an interesting story, actually. I'll try and make it as brief as possible, but I had a chance meeting with a very, very well-established entrepreneur in real estate in London. I was working somewhere, and he basically came into this brand or store that I was in. And the first thing he said with his best friend is, he walks in and he said, I'm broke. He said, and everything there costs, everything there was expensive. The shirt was 5,000, suit was 20, like it was really expensive. And so the managing directors there looked at him and they're like, well, if you're broke, you're in the wrong place, right? Because everything was so expensive. I don't want to mention the name of the place for certain reasons, but I ended up giving him my business card and I said, listen, we have a private event, it'll be a lot cheaper. discounted. If you want to come, please feel free. So he came, and this is in 2000 and maybe two, three, four, somewhere around there. And he spent £75,000, right? And I remember everyone thinking, isn't this the man that said he couldn't basically afford anything? And so I was shocked, obviously. So we helped him get his stuff in the car, and I remember thinking to myself, hey man, what'd you do? He's like, listen, here's my card, just keep in touch. And so he actually became a client of mine, and he was a bit, he had a lot of weight, so he's this Tony Soprano looking kind of man, right? And so, through our relationship, I was kind of able to build some confidence and, getting a stylist to get clothes onto him all the time, weekly. So eventually we became friends. And then one day I get a phone call randomly, and he said, what are you doing on this date? And I said, I don't really have any plans. And he said, okay, well, it's my birthday, and me and my best friend who you met me with don't want to celebrate it without you. So here's a ticket. Everything's paid for. You will just need to turn up. So anyway, it's in south of France. This guy flies me over to south of France. I get to the airport. Helicopter. I'm 21, 22 at this time, right? The helicopter picks me up, takes me to this hotel in the south of France. I meet him, and he's on a boat, the yacht. And the yacht he happens to own at that time is a yacht that used to be owned by the great Aristotle Onassis, right? So you get into the yacht, and there's like pictures from JFK, Frank Sinatra, Marilyn Monroe. Everyone has been on this guy's boat, and this guy now owns it. So obviously, as a 22-year-old, my mind is completely blown, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here, right? And we're just enjoying the festivities, all of that, and I end up saying, "Listen, man, what would you do?" And he said, "Listen, I'm in real estate." I said, "Well, how am I going to be like you?" And he said, "When you get to London, quit your job and come and work for me." So I started working with him, and basically became his like mentee, just following what he was doing. And he was a developer. He would develop his own properties. He would sell it or rent it through his own agency in central London. So he had a portfolio of about £200 million. And, I was with him, just with him. Everything he said I should do, I just did it. I didn't question him, nothing. He was a Greek guy, right? And for me, it was a great opportunity, coupled with the experience and stuff I had from my father and mother. And so fast forward, recession comes 2008. He liquidates most of his portfolio, and he said, listen, why don't you set up your own business? And I will help you get some clients, and then you can kind of build up your own portfolio. So I set up my own refurbishment business, design, build, and consulting business in central London. And I started doing refurbishment work for the embassies, some of the people he put me in touch with. And funny enough, one of my clients became Aliko Dangote. So Aliko Dangote was my client for 7 to 8 years in London, managing his buildings. So one of his people that were running his office, they became a good friend. And eventually I started doing work for them. So I had like 5 clients. And, when you're doing this kind of work, you have a lot of people coming to you saying, this is your client, they're this kind of person, can you get them to invest in my business? 99% of the time I was like, no, because, I do property, I don't know what I'm getting them into. Until one occasion, one of my cousins brought me a music tech startup. I really liked it, and one of my clients invested in it. But they said, if I'm going to invest in it, we're going to put you on the board, right? And so I had to get on the board. That was a music tech startup based out of London, transition between London and LA. And, I decided, okay, this is very interesting. This is an area I want to go into. And I basically sold off my property business to my business partner at the time and basically got into tech. In addition to that, I was looking at all sorts of emerging tech platforms, right? And so I was in this business, music tech startup, and what they were doing at the time is they were sharing music agnostically across different streaming platforms. So they came up with an interesting idea where if you had a Spotify account and you had an Apple account, you could share music between one another, which was very innovative at that time, right? Now it's not a big thing now, but before it was. and managed to drive the valuation to about 150 million pounds at the time. And eventually there was a takeover and the IP needed to be sold to another streaming platform. But on my side, I learned a lot from that situation. And once that business venture was over, I got myself into more alternative investments and seeing how I can consult tech startups. And so Bitcoin landed on my desk. When Bitcoin landed on my desk, that was in 2014. And I started working with a good associate of ours who's a great engineer. And we started mining Bitcoins as early as that. So one Bitcoin, because then you could mine it. You just needed the servers and you needed the speed of and power of electricity to get it going. So you did like one Bitcoin, 2, 5, 10, eventually became like somewhere like 20, loads of Bitcoins, accumulated about $1 million worth of Bitcoins, right? And then at the time, we didn't have what you have today. We didn't have Binance. We didn't have Coinbase. We didn't have none of those things. We put the Bitcoin on a platform called Mt. Gox. Those of you listening who have any interaction or have any experience of Mt. Gox, they got hacked for something close to 16 billion. And we ended up losing the $1 million of Bitcoin we had mined, right? And so that was my first entry into Web3. But given I was living between London and the West Coast, I just kind of kept interest in the business. And then, with so many other things I don't want to give away yet. Fast forward post-pandemic, I decided to launch the company. And that's basically where we are today. And I'll share more what TRCrowd does, but I'm conscious of time.
That is such an interesting journey of how you've gotten to where you are right now. But it's interesting how we always have a touch point on being inspired to become entrepreneurs. And for you, it's your parents. For you, Sydney, what was your starting point to be inspired to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I think it was more of a rebellion, to be honest, from the traditional. I think my dad wanted me to go into oil, and I was just like, nah, like let me just try something else. So I didn't actually go into entrepreneurship intentionally. It was just because I didn't want to do something, and that's kind of what led me to it. And I began to fall in love with it as we went on. Yeah.
That's still okay. Rebellion is still a valid way to enter into this journey. So I'm just going to read one or two responses people have shared about what African innovation means to them. So Margaret says, African innovation to me is Africans coming together to create systems and solutions to address our needs. Esther says, African innovation means innovative technologies, startups, programs developed by African needs and challenges. Daniel says, for me, I think diaspora, especially MasterCard Foundation alumni, can support African innovators by conducting an entrepreneurial survey, which will capture details of all MasterCard alumni entrepreneurs like us in Africa. But I came across an interesting statistic, and it says the number of startups in Nigeria are estimated to have exceeded 3,360 in 2022, and that's the highest in Africa. Then to follow is Kenya and South Africa, and Kenya approximately 1,000 and South Africa 660 startups respectively. So with that in mind, technology and innovation has played a key role in now seeing the rise of startups in the African continent. So for you, Sydney, are there any successful collaborations that you have been a part of that has seen this rise of African startups sprout in West Africa or in Africa and have just, contributed considerably in impacting innovation on the continent?
Yes, I have. I thought about this question quite crucially, and there were just too many examples for me to think through. But some of the collaborations that I have noted, number one are firstly, cross-country collaborations between like multiple African countries. We all know about the AFCT after the initiative, which is trying to remove borders between trade, and there's a lot of businesses that are taking advantage of that, payment platforms, I think including can't remember the name right now, that is just trying to bridge. So it's much easier to do business between Ghana and Nigeria, Nigeria and South Africa, South Africa and Kenya. And that's something that I'm just mentioning. So this is a collaboration that is happening, but also a collaboration that a lot of people can leverage. That the better that this thing goes, the better for us all. My business is the open space, for example, is basically run fundamentally on collaborations across Africa. But we've also done some collaborations with companies in the US, with a company called Birthright Africa that is spearheaded by a group including Jadena. I don't know if you know Jadena, the hip hop artist, to bring people from the US to Africa and just kind of help to immerse them into the culture, et cetera, et cetera. And Open Space was a vehicle for that, but has also been able to create some of these honest conversations about what other potential collaborations could happen. There's a few others that I can mention. We know the GUBA, that's the Ghana UK. It's an organization that bridges Ghana and the UK, and like a lot of businesses and personalities in relation to that. Tech Connect Africa has been really good. The skincare brands like Kaime, remotely. So there's a lot of things that are happening there, and then also with my business Workspace, which primarily I wouldn't call it a partnership just yet, but the networks that we have in Europe and in the US and in other parts of Africa really allow us to hire a lot more talent. So the idea is that the more business that we get around the world, the more people we can hire. And I believe that's these are some of the bridges that I've seen have really spearheaded development on the continent. Yeah, so that's from my perspective.
Just to build on that, when you say these collaborations and partnerships, one of the things that makes these collaborations a success is people understanding, the context that they're coming in. So if an American company is coming to Ghana, they understand where they can have a role to play in it. So how do you guide now someone from the diaspora or someone from the Western part of the world to understand that this is where I would want them to invest in, let's say, Workspace or another space in Ghana? How do you take them through that journey to help them understand that, yes, something can come out of this?
Right. I mean, the first question that I always like to ask anyone generally who is looking to collaborate or just do something is just, who do you want to help and what do you want to get out of it, right? So a lot of people in the diaspora are thinking about ways by which they themselves can connect with the home continent, but also can create impact. So that's one thing, but also for it to be sustainable financially, right? And so some people have tried it and failed. And I believe those failures, number one, are either underestimating what it's going to take for it to be sustainable, even though the impact element, is there. So that's something that I'd really encourage that people think about, that as much as you can have an idea or have a collaboration that is impactful, you always have to look at the sustainability element of it, right? And it's just important for you to do your due diligence in relation to who is doing that. So not a lot of people pilot certain ideas. So I really encourage that people pilot ideas for about 90 days, 6 months before pouring all your investments into anything, just to be able to, so you have a hypothesis, you want to see if this particular product or this particular app or whatever it is that you are coming up with will take flight within this specific timeline in a particular way, right? Like maybe you don't necessarily need tons of revenue coming out of it, but just to assess the amount of adoption and also the evidence of impact. Because sometimes if you are okay with just making money, that's okay. But I know there's a lot of people who can make money in the West and stay there, right? So you want to make sure that there's evidence of impact and then evidence of sustainable revenue or sustainable growth. And then you invest more long-term. So yeah, generally I just encourage have conversations like with people like me or Dell to just guide you on, where to start. ask yourself what you're looking for, create a hypothesis, and then pilot first. When you're absolutely sure, then you go forward with it. That's what I would say in relation to that. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Sometimes, as you've said, we just want to enter the market and just be like, yes, my idea is going to work, but it's important to test it, to pilot it for however long you see necessary. For you, Del, with your company, Web3 Africa, how are you using this platform to collaborate and also to power the next frontier of African innovation?
Thanks. I really like what Sydney was saying and their approach there. I'm familiar with some of the people that Sydney's working with. And funny enough, I've heard a lot about the stuff that you guys have been doing. I've just never met Sydney before, which is a shame. So hopefully through this, I can actually see you in person in Ghana. So thanks for bringing us together, MasterCard. So on my side, Web3 Accra really is designed for the community first, right? Designed to create awareness in the Web3 community in Ghana and across Africa. So our focus is education, policy, and community building. And when we set up this platform, we set it up through collaboration of conferences. We've teamed up with the likes of Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation. We hosted Vitalik there at some point this year. We also worked closely with Afropolitan, who are building the first digital nation, and also worked closely with the Bank of Ghana, the SEC, and a lot of the Web3 startups that are in Ghana that I wasn't aware of until we actually put the conference out there. And so on the educational front, we often create the kind of environment that lures people that are very interested and inspired by Web3, but don't have access to it, right? And so our symposium that we did with Global Citizens, when Global Citizens was hosted in Ghana, is we managed to get VR headsets, we managed to get computers, and we managed to get some of the dopest entrepreneurs in Ghana from, aside, we didn't know Sydney at the time, but had we would have got him there. But we've got, people like Small God, who are in the entertainment business. We had Kweku Bediako, who started an amazing fashion brand. And we had so many other people. And the objective was to combine technology, entrepreneurs and creatives in a space where young people could basically ask them all the questions they wanted to. And some of these people had never put on headsets, right? They've never used virtual reality before, because essentially, if you are not going to some sort of private school in Africa, right, and parents can't afford it, you're never going to have access into the Web3 space. Well, at least in the same way that a child who goes to an international school in Accra can access it and has access to the diaspora. And so Web3 really is to bring together the technology, the local community, right, and have them be educated in a way that helps them to leapfrog, right? Some of the areas that we were not able to leapfrog when Web 2 was around, right? So you got to think of where programmers were 10 years ago in Africa or 20 years ago, when the likes of Facebook, Amazon were being built, right? If you were not studying outside of Africa, you really didn't have as much of a chance, right, to be a developer that would work for Amazon or work for Facebook or whoever, or even create your own startup, right? Because the technical infrastructure wasn't even present, because we didn't have as much talent. We had some, but not as much. And so our objective with Web3 is to create awareness, legitimize the industry, and bring together youth from different parts of the country, including experienced, well-established global and local entrepreneurs, right, in one space that allows us to leapfrog, right, and put Africa in a position where we can actually be competitive in Web3 from a workforce perspective, from a startup perspective, and from an IP perspective.
I'm listening to this and I'm just like, these are such successful stories, that you guys are sharing, and kudos to you guys for this impact that you are living on the continent. But here's the thing, some of us may be having these businesses and we're wondering, okay, fine, I have this business, I want to plug in with what Sydney is doing, and I want to plug in with what Dell is doing, but I have no idea on how to meet people like you or how to find these opportunities to network. So how would you encourage an entrepreneur out there, be it Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, in stepping into spaces where they are already in, but looking for the person who can guide them and build the bridge for them to have such successful collaborations? Any of you can go.
Yeah, so I mean, we do live in an age where access to information is much more than it was many years ago. And so it just depends on what you're looking for. I do, for example, I'm in Cape Town right now, and the first thing that I did when I got off the flight was checked on Eventbrite to see what business networking events are available. And usually I look for the ones that are paid. Because the ones that are paid usually have their filtering process a little bit to be able to get more like high quality individuals in the room. And I say this cognizant of the fact that some people are privileged and some people are not as privileged to be able to afford to attend some of these things. But it is something that it's just a good way to ensure that, okay, if you save up a bit of money over a month or two and get access to some of these, one or two of these events, it at least increases your chances of being able to access these kinds of individuals. That's number one. Number two, the other challenge is that the way people are interacting is there's too many people out there now trying to do something. So it's very difficult for someone who, let's say, meets 100 people a day to like focus on the partnership or the collaboration that just you are looking to have, right? So I always encourage that. I say that value is the one thing that nobody can deny. So it's important for you to think about something that you can give to someone when you meet them. So I'll give an example in relation to the people that I've hired over time. Most of the people who I've hired over time always came to me and offered to work for me for free for 3 months, right? As an internship or something like that, right? And I was like, but then technically there's nothing that I can lose. They identified a problem. Someone said, they noticed that my LinkedIn posts were fairly inconsistent and they would like to just help me with, I could send them a voice note every day. They'll create my LinkedIn post and then they'll put that. And that guy is now the operations manager for my company currently. So it's important for you to also approach the right way, and usually offering value first without expecting anything in return. Because as Dell indicated, relationships, they take time, and the value is actually over a long period of time versus, hey, I've met you today, let's collaborate, let's do something right now. Maybe at the time that you're meeting this person, in terms of their long-term or short-term strategy, the partnership with you doesn't necessarily align, right? So it is important to be able to meet them with something that gives them value, and sometimes value is just intelligence, right? Like for me, market intelligence is like gold to me. So if I come to Kenya and like someone can tell me about the true state of the startup ecosystem and the kind of businesses I can look at, like, listen, I will take that person to dinner 3 times because I want to keep hearing the things that they're telling me to guide me about how to approach the market. And then in that relationship, if the person should say, hey, I have a collaboration, why don't we have a podcast together? Or why don't we do something that bridges the gap between, the West and then in Africa or East Africa and West Africa, whatever that is, I'm a lot more aligned because of that, the value that they've created, the sustained value as well. And then the opportunity is also quite aligned with what I'm looking for. And the last thing is also that a lot of us are very excited. I know this firsthand. And excitement usually leads to idealism, right? Idealism is where you feel like something has to happen immediately because you want it to happen and you've always been inspired. And, it is important to understand what your North Star is, and the strategy to achieve that can differ. It can, and it can differ not necessarily even in execution, but in terms of your timing. There's something you can be working on for 3 years, and then there's something you can wait, build a relationship on for 6 months, and then in 6 months, it will get you exactly where you need to go in 3 years. So there's an interesting way to look at these things when you're approaching these kinds of collaborations and meeting with high value individuals. So that's just my little advice for the group. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's interesting. I heard somewhere, or maybe I read it, that when you meet someone today, the collaboration or the partnership or whatever you're going to work on, the lead might actually, solidify in a year's time. So are you going to be patient to just maintain that relationship or connection vis-a-vis, as you said, being, excited and having this moment of it needs to happen now? Everything is built slowly. So Dell has a meeting in the next 15. So just to give him the opportunity to share his last thoughts, Dell, for me, my question is this. You've worked with the likes of Hennessy. You sit as the chair for Arts Help. What are you aiming, or what would I say, what is your legacy, and what are you hoping that it will be for your children and future generations?
Yes, an amazing question. Also, I like what Sydney was saying about how people should get involved at early stages of their career when they're trying to like take things to the next level and they can't see the road ahead at least clearly as as they would like to. So I think for me, I had this moment in 2018 where it was about why am I doing what I'm doing? And why that happened was because my father had passed away, and I remember being in his bedroom, just, cleaning the room and looking at his clothes and all the stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, this man is dead, gone. None of these things went with him, right? Everything here is for me and my siblings to decide what we want to do with it, or we just literally give it away and that's the end of that. So that is the finality of life. That is the superiority of God. And that's the mortality of man, right? And so when you're thinking about these things, you got to think about it in a context of impact. And so I thought, what are the 3 areas for me that makes sense for me to be a part of? And that was tech, because I really believe technology is going to solve a lot of Africa's problems. Not everything. We have other problems to solve, but it's going to be a key component in expanding our source of revenue and giving more visibility to our talent, right? So tech was one of them. Sustainability is another aspect of it because we have to sustain the things that we have, right? For the next generation. And then culture. I strongly believe Africa's superpower is culture. We have so much culture, rich culture in the continent. You go to East Africa, what you guys are doing there. You go to North, you go to South. The culture in Africa is so diverse. It's absolutely incredible. And then you look at the music that's coming out of it, the food, not to mention the jollof rice in Ghana is the best, but that will, over time, things will change, maybe not. And just so many other aspects. And I just feel deeply that those are the 3 areas that I needed to focus on, which is why I have Web3. We have a sanitation business that focuses on dealing in sanitation in the ports of Ghana. And then culture, I'm heavily vested in the entertainment area for Ghana and in the diaspora. And I also try and extend the knowledge of Web3 in different parts of the world where I can. And so my objective here is that if those 3 areas can be taken to a stage where it hasn't been taken before, within the capacity of the things that I am building with other people, then we would have left the world slightly better than we found it, right? And that's the objective, is to basically, if I can legitimize Web3 in Ghana, right, and build a company that gives some hope to some other entrepreneurs, right? Not just in Ghana, but other parts of Africa, then we would have done, our work would have been done. And that is the trajectory I'm on with all the 3 pillars that I'm working towards building. So I guess in context, to leave the world better than I found it is probably the way of concluding that statement.
But it's interesting how you have seen such key pillars and just making sure that that's your main focus, because many of us, when we're seeking to leave impact or make the world a better place. We have all these brilliant ideas, but we haven't narrowed them down. So kudos to you, and I truly appreciate you for being transparent and for sharing that. So as we wind down the conversation, you feel free to drop off because you say you have a call to take. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation, Dale. I'll touch base with you later. For you, Sydney, what legacy are you building towards? And if your younger self was seated across you right now, what would you tell him with all that you know now?
All right, so I'll start first with a question about legacy. I mean, for me, it's really important to firstly, make the tools, the access to the tools that I needed when I started out available for the next generation and the next generation to keep going. So it's like, my thing is just leaving behind systems of access. So I've been heavily convicted to, sit on as many YouTube videos as I can, podcasts, LinkedIn posts, just so that the knowledge and the lessons that I've learned just exist for everybody to be able to have access to. Some people have asked me to do courses that I put out onto the internet. So these are the things that are really weighing heavy on my heart. But then also with my platforms, Workspace and Open Space, if you can see, they are platforms that are not tied to my intelligence as a founder. It's a platform that exists that to basically all the parties involved can use it to benefit each other. So whether I'm here or I'm dead and gone, customers would always be able to access African creatives. African creatives will always be able to access customers. And the machinery in between is actually very available knowledge that any young setup, because currently my team is a team of 4 people that is running this global business with hundreds of clients and, making lots of revenue, right? So, and just this year, we invested in, creating lots of playbooks that eventually we may not put out into the public yet, but we're recruiting interns and stuff who will come and learn the way we do these things. So basically anybody can continue this platform and continue that cycle of access and scale that business. So that's the same thing, for open space, instead of the conversations, the honest conversations being centered around me, it's more about the platform, the way of doing things, and then just leaving that for the world to be able to use, to be able to create benefits for each other. So that's just generally my idea of legacy. In relation to what I would say to my younger self, it's a very hard one because I think my priorities have evolved over time. Initially, I was once the excited person that just wanted everything to happen now. And I have learned the lesson that there's a place for that because you need that energy to keep going, especially when things go wrong. But then it creates a certain anxiety that leads to a lot of either bad decision-making or the inability to enjoy the journey. To be honest, yes, everyone wants to be successful. Everyone wants to make a lot of money. But I feel like the only reason anybody really needs to be successful is to be free so that they have the freedom to create more things that can impact the world. But you have to check yourself as to why you are doing certain things. Do you just want to be rich because you want to be someone said something to you? Do you want to, you have to just check what your motivations are. And sometimes, as I said, you can be idealistic. Oh, I've seen Mark Zuckerberg and I believe I can be Africa's Mark Zuckerberg by, 2025. So I need to do it. You totally deserve to have that dream. But then you ask yourself, why? Like, why really? If you think about it critically, why really? And the only answer you have to that question is because I want to. So my younger self, I would just say, just check your ego, check how idealistic you are, check the reasons why you're doing certain things, rid yourself of that kind of anxiety and that weight that just made you make impulsive decisions and just seek out things that seem honorable, but are not necessarily, for the right reasons. And really just focus on enjoying the journey, because I think that's just what we're all on this journey, just trying to get somewhere. Some people will make it, some people won't, some people will leave change and not be rich. Some people will be rich and still leave change. It's all part of it. It's all part of the ecosystem. And I just think it's really, if you're not enjoying it every day, there's really no point as to why you're doing it. So that's what I would say to my younger self.
I'm hearing you saying, enjoy the journey. Let me tell you, my younger self, she was in a hurry. And it's just like, no, it's a journey. It's not about, getting to the finish line like a sprint. This life is a marathon. So yeah, to everyone who's listening, just enjoy the journey. It's full of ups and downs, but whilst we're going through the ups and downs, we're learning and we're becoming better versions of ourselves. So Del, what are your closing remarks? If someone was to watch this video 10 years from now, what would you want them to know?
Right. I feel like it's very important to focus on what you are giving opposed to what you're taking. Very, very important. Because what you're taking, often enough, you won't take with you. Right? You will only leave it. And so my closing statement to any entrepreneur working towards a dream is, of course, enjoy the fruits of your labor, but you often find out that the fruits of your labor, you don't need much. It's going to be very, very little in comparison to what you're going to give, right? And so focus on what you're going to give, right? Because what you take, you won't take with you.
That is so powerful. I'm still digesting what you're saying. What you take, you won't take with you. It's all about, what are you giving? And that is so important because it shifts our perspective and makes us more intentional in what we're pursuing and what we're building. Because taking is very selfish and me, when in fact giving is about the other person and about the community. Thank you. So thank you for that. And for you, Sydney, what's your closing remark? We've talked about entrepreneurship, how we can have successful collaborations, yet at the same time, these collaborations take a long time. Like, for example, I interviewed you on my podcast last year. I was only getting to see you in person this year. So how would you just encourage someone about this journey of entrepreneurship?
Well, I mean, I noticed that the conversation has kind of veered also a little bit more towards entrepreneurship. I know it started off also in relation to leveraging the relationship between the diaspora and people on the continent. For the entrepreneurship journey, what I will say is that it's really important to just focus on the holistic journey. So for example, you can be a fantastic entrepreneur and know how to make money, but if you're not financially diligent, you're useless, right? Like you would lose everything that you make. If you're not emotionally intelligent, for example, people always say that like it's really painful to be successful and have no one to share it with, right? Like, so it's important to learn all the different things about being emotionally intelligent, being self-aware, being financially responsible, being climate savvy. There's a lot of other things that also contribute to that. So when you're just focusing on that on your journey, it's important not to only have your head down looking at that, but also building yourself as a person. And with the things that you do, if you teach others, the beautiful thing about giving in relation to what Del said is that's what makes you a thought leader, actually, right? If you give a lot more, it makes you a thought leader. And then when you're a thought leader, you actually get more business because people trust you more. So it's like, it's interesting that giving actually helps you receive a lot more. So that's something that we should think about. The other thing I will say is that it's really important to think about Africa, as a whole, because the whole world is thinking about Africa right now. So we don't even have a choice. Africa is genuinely the last frontier for resources. It's going to have the world's largest population of human capital in a couple of years. Like there's literally nowhere else to go, and we are here, right? And so I really love the passion of the diaspora to connect, but then for those of you who are also here, it's really important for you to also leverage the interest in Africa right now. Genuinely, reach out to people, connect with people, help people, give people advice. call people out, you know, like you know, be part of the conversation, be part of the movement. It's like a lot of people miss the industrial age. There's legacies and families that are still benefiting from decisions that their grandparents and great-grandparents made in those industries, right? You are in the age that will define the next 200 years. And you are in the continent, or you're part of the continent, or part of the movement that will define the rest of history for humanity. Don't be a bystander. Don't think small. Get involved in the conversation, help people, innovate, make ideas, make mistakes. Like, I just really want to encourage you to immerse yourself in this whole conversation and push about Africa and the diaspora. And you'd be shocked at the things and people that you will meet and discover, and the kind of impact that you're going to make.
Fantastic. So for me, I will just tell Sydney, let's continue having those conversations for open space in Nairobi. I know you did this one this year. Let there be more in Nairobi next year. I look forward to them. For Dell, thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this conversation. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sydney.
Bro. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Bye.
Thank you.
So for everyone who has tuned in, I appreciate all of you. And once the link is ready on YouTube, I'll be able to share it across on the different networks. But I know also Baobab will share this YouTube link. So it's the 1st of December. Happy December. And as we transition to the later stages of this month, happy holidays. May you enjoy this holiday season. And until the next time, take care of yourselves. Thank you.